Get out of the pool, my mom screamed at my kids. This party is for respectable family only, not divorced failures. 50 guests stared while my children stood dripping wet, humiliated. I walked out without a word. But the next morning, her realtor called her. Ma'am, the owner of the beach house is terminating your lease. That's when my mom realized I was the owner. Before I show you how this exploded into the biggest family humiliation of the year, don't just watch silently. Hit like so the algorithm stops rewarding parents who weaponize shame. You want to know when I realized my mother cared more about strangers than her own child? It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 tiny cuts across 30 years of my life. 1,000 moments where I watched her smile brighter for the neighbors than she ever smiled for me. Where I heard her laugh louder at dinner parties than she ever laughed at our kitchen table. Where I saw her straighten her spine with pride when someone complimented her house, her car, her perfectly manicured lawn, but slump with disappointment when she looked at me. I grew up in a home where image wasn't just important, it was oxygen. My mother breathed it. She fed off it. She built her entire existence around what other people thought, and God help you if you threatened that carefully constructed facade. Every single decision in our house was filtered through one question. What will people think? Not is this right? Not will this make us happy? Just, what will the neighbors say? What will the church ladies whisper? What will the country club crowd assume? And I was always the problem child. Not because I was wild or reckless or rebellious. No, my crime was so much worse in her eyes. I was ordinary. I chose a practical career over a prestigious one. I married for love instead of status. I bought a modest house I could afford instead of drowning in debt for something impressive. Every choice I made was responsible, stable, real. And she hated every single one of them because they didn't give her bragging rights. But you know what really turned me into her personal embarrassment? My divorce. Oh, that was the ultimate sin. Never mind that my ex-husband had checked out of our marriage years before the papers were signed. Never mind that staying would have destroyed me and damaged my children. Never mind that divorce is sometimes the bravest, healthiest choice a person can make. No, all that mattered to her was that I had given her a broken family to explain to her friends. And she never let me forget it. Every family gathering, every holiday, every casual phone call, there it was. Sometimes subtle. Well, you know how hard things have been for her since the situation. Sometimes direct. You embarrassed this family with your broken home. She said that to my face once. At Easter dinner. In front of my children. Like my worth as a human being evaporated the moment I signed divorce papers. But here's the cruelest part. My kids loved her. They genuinely loved their grandmother. They didn't see the cold calculation in her eyes. They didn't hear the contempt dripping from her voice when she talked about me to others. They just saw a grandma who gave them cookies and let them play in her big backyard and smiled at them during family photos. They had no idea that her love for them was conditional. That it would last exactly as long as they reflected well on her. That the moment they became inconvenient or embarrassing, she would discard them just like she discarded me. I knew this. Deep down, I always knew this. But I kept bringing my children around her because I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, her capacity for cruelty had limits. That she wouldn't weaponize her own grandchildren. That somewhere beneath all that toxic narcissism was a grandmother who actually gave a damn. I was wrong. And that pool incident? That wasn't random. That wasn't a momentary loss of control. That was the inevitable breaking point of years of suppressed contempt finally erupting in the most public, most humiliating way possible. That was her true self, finally brutally honest. If you've ever had a parent who cared more about strangers than their own child, don't just sit there. Tap like so the world knows this kind of behavior isn't normal. When my mother announced she was throwing a huge pool birthday party for herself, I knew immediately that we weren't really invited. Oh, she went through the motions. She mentioned it in the family group chat, dropped hints in phone calls, made sure everyone knew about the expensive caterers and the uniform dress code and the elite guest list. But we weren't invited. Not really. The actual invitations went out 3 weeks early. Beautiful cream cardstock with embossed lettering. Hand-delivered to my siblings. Posted on her social media for all her friends to see. She tagged everyone. Everyone except me. I watched her Facebook post get dozens of comments. So elegant. Can't wait. You deserve this. And my name was nowhere. Then, exactly 4 days before the party, I got a text message. Not even a call. A text. Well, you can come if you really want to. The kids might enjoy the pool. Read that again. If you really want to. Like I was begging. Like I was imposing. Like my attendance at my own mother's birthday party was a burden she was graciously willing to tolerate. No, please come, or we'd love to see you, or even a basic you're invited. Just, if you really want to force yourself into this event where you're clearly not wanted, I suppose I can't stop you. My first instinct was to decline. To protect myself and my children from whatever cruelty she was planning. Because I knew that this wasn't going to end well. You don't exclude someone from the official invitation and then toss them a pity invite 4 days later, unless you're setting them up for something. But then my kids found out. Their cousins had been talking about it for weeks. The big pool party at Grandma's beach house, the fancy decorations, the live music, the dessert bar. And my children's faces lit up with this heartbreaking excitement. Mom, can we go? Please. We've never been to a big pool party with everyone. Please. How do you say no to that? How do you explain to your children that their grandmother doesn't actually want them there? That they're the shameful secret she wishes didn't exist? You can't. You can't crush them like that. So I said yes. I said yes knowing it was a trap. I said yes knowing I was walking my babies into a humiliation I should have protected them from. I bought them new swimsuits. Good ones, not expensive but nice. I packed their favorite towels and sunscreen and goggles. I told them about pool safety and reminded them to say thank you and to be respectful. I prepared them for a wonderful day because I was desperately hoping that maybe this time would be different. That maybe she wouldn't humiliate us in front of 50 guests. That maybe she'd remember these were her grandchildren and show them some basic human decency. But I noticed something as I was getting ready. I checked her social media one more time, and there it was, the official invitation post. Professional photography. Every family member tagged. Every guest list detail shared. And we weren't on it. She had publicly announced this party to everyone who mattered in her social circle, and she had erased us from the narrative entirely. That should have been my final warning. That should have been the moment I turned the car around. But my kids were already singing in the back seat, already imagining cannonballs and diving contests and ice cream. And I couldn't destroy that joy. Even knowing what was coming, I couldn't be the one to break their hearts. So I drove us straight into the nightmare she'd prepared. If you've ever been invited somewhere only so someone could feel superior to you, drop a like. You deserve better than pity invitations. The moment we pulled up to that beach house, I knew we'd made a terrible mistake. The driveway was packed with luxury cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Teslas, vehicles worth more than my annual salary. Guests were arriving in resort where that cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Women in designer cover-ups and men in expensive linen shirts, all laughing and holding champagne glasses like they were at some exclusive country club event. And then there were my kids, in their simple swimsuits from Target, carrying their faded towels with cartoon characters on them, looking around with wide, excited eyes, completely unaware that they were already being judged. My mother's greeting was ice-wrapped in a thin veneer of politeness. Oh, you came. Not "I'm so glad you're here" or "the kids look adorable," or even a basic hello. Just "oh, you came." Like we were unexpected door-to-door salesmen, she was too polite to turn away. Then her eyes flicked down to my children and she added, with this tight little smile that never reached her eyes, "Stay out of the deep end. I don't want insurance problems." Insurance problems. Not "I want you to be safe," or "the deep end is for the older kids." Insurance problems. Like my children were a liability. Like their presence was a risk she was calculating. But my kids didn't hear the venom. They heard pool, and they ran toward the water with pure, beautiful joy. They jumped into the shallow end, splashing and laughing and playing exactly the way children should at a pool party. They weren't being wild or destructive or inappropriate. They were just happy. Genuinely, innocently happy. I stood by the fence, watching them, trying to ignore the stares. Trying to ignore the women who kept glancing at me, and then leaning together to whisper. Trying to ignore my mother, who was working the party like a politician, all charm and grace for her important guests while completely avoiding eye contact with me. Then my nephews showed up. My sister's kids, the golden grandchildren. They showed up wearing designer swim trunks, carrying name-brand water toys, and they immediately cannonballed into the deep end. Water went everywhere. They were screaming and roughhousing and splashing guests and diving under each other and creating absolute chaos. And you know what my mother did? She laughed. She actually laughed and said, "Boys will be boys," with this indulgent, proud smile. But my kids who were playing quietly in the shallow end, they got glares, whispers, judgment. I overheard the women standing behind me. They didn't even try to lower their voices. That's the divorced one. She never recovered financially. I heard the husband left her. Well, you can see why. No ambition. Those poor children. Growing up in a broken home. They spoke about my life, my choices, my children like we were a tragic news story they were dissecting over brunch. And then, the moment that burned itself into my memory forever, my mother's voice cut through the party chatter like a knife. Get out of the pool. Everything stopped. The music seemed to fade. Conversations died mid-sentence. 50 guests turned to stare. And my children, my beautiful innocent children, froze in the water, confusion and fear washing over their faces. This party is for respectable family only, not divorced failures. Those words echoed across that perfect backyard. Across the designer furniture and the expensive catering and the champagne tower. They echoed through my chest, through my bones, through every nerve ending in my body. Not divorced failures. She said that. Out loud. In front of everyone. In front of my children. My kids didn't move. They just stood there in the shallow end, water dripping down their faces, their joy completely shattered. Every guest was staring at us now. Some shocked, some embarrassed, some nodding slightly like they'd been waiting for this moment. Like we'd finally been put in our place. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't defend myself or argue or cause a scene. I walked over to my children, wrapped them in their cartoon towels, and gathered our things in complete silence. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the bag. My face was burning with humiliation, so intense I thought I might actually collapse. But I held it together. I had to. For them. We walked through that crowd of silent, staring guests. Past my mother, who had already turned away, already resumed her hostess smile. Past my siblings, who looked at the ground. Past the caterers and the decorations, and the perfectly curated image of a perfect family celebration. We walked to the car, got in, and I drove away while my children sobbed in the back seat. Why does Grandma hate us? My daughter asked through tears. And I had no answer. No answer that wouldn't destroy what little innocence she had left. If that scene hurt you just hearing it, imagine being those kids. Show some compassion, and like this video, so stories like this reach someone who needs it. I drove for 20 minutes before I could even speak. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had gone white. My jaw was clenched so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Behind me, my children were crying. That hopeless, confused crying that children do when they don't understand why someone hurt them. When they can't comprehend cruelty because they've never felt it before. Why does Grandma hate us? My son asked again, his voice small and broken. And something inside me just snapped. Not into anger. Into clarity. Crystal clear, sharp-edged clarity that cut through 30 years of excuses and justifications and desperate hope that she might change. This woman, this person who gave birth to me, who raised me, who taught me to walk and talk and tie my shoes, had just humiliated her own grandchildren in front of 50 strangers. She had weaponized their innocence to prove a point. She had used their joy as target practice for her contempt. And the worst part, the absolute worst part? She was the same woman who once sat me down as a teenager and lectured me about family values. About how you never, ever shame family in public. About how blood protects blood. About how the outside world was harsh enough without turning on each other. She had just violated every single principle she'd drilled into my head. And she'd done it without hesitation. Without remorse. Without even a flicker of recognition that she'd crossed a line that should never be crossed. I looked at my children in the rearview mirror, their faces blotchy and tear-stained, their new swimsuits still damp, their excitement completely destroyed, and I made a decision. A final, irreversible decision that settled into my chest like concrete. I will never beg for this woman's approval again. I will never sacrifice my children's well-being for her ego. I will never pretend that her cruelty is love just because she's my mother. I am done. Completely, permanently done. And then another thought surfaced. A thought that had been lurking in the back of my mind for years, but I'd never allowed myself to fully acknowledge. That beach house. That beautiful, impressive beach house she'd been bragging about for 3 years. The one she used to host her elite retreats, and her exclusive parties and her perfectly curated social media posts. The one she told everyone she'd purchased herself through hard work and smart investments. With the clear implication that I was too financially incompetent to achieve the same. That beach house wasn't hers. It was never hers. And she knew it. I reached across to the glove compartment with one hand, still driving, and pulled out a folder. Property documents. Mortgage papers. lease agreements. All with my name on them. All proof of something I'd kept quiet about for years because I thought silence was kindness. Because I thought letting her take credit was a small price to pay for family peace. But family peace built on lies and humiliation isn't peace. It's captivity. And I was done being a prisoner in my own family. If you've ever had someone mistake your kindness for weakness like this, it tells the world you didn't stay quiet because you were scared. You stayed quiet because you were done. Let me tell you about that beach house. The one my mother has been using as the centerpiece of her social status for 3 years. The one she posts about constantly. Sunset photos from the deck, champagne brunches on the patio, carefully staged shots of her morning coffee with the ocean view in the background. Every single post with some variation of hard work pays off, or dreams really do come true, or my personal favorite. Unlike some people, I invested wisely. That beach house. I bought it. With my money. After my divorce. 7 years ago, when my marriage was falling apart and my entire life felt like it was collapsing, I did something that terrified me. I invested in real estate. I found a small beach property that needed work. Nothing fancy. Nothing impressive. Just a simple 2-bedroom cottage with good bones and ocean access. I scraped together every penny I had, took out a loan I could barely afford, and bought it. Not as a vacation home. Not as a status symbol. As an investment property. As a way to build security for my children's future. I renovated it myself on weekends. Painted walls, replaced fixtures, landscaped the yard. I turned that rundown cottage into something beautiful. Something valuable. And then I rented it out to cover the mortgage and start building equity. That's when my mother found out about it. And suddenly she had an idea. She needed a place to host her social events. Somewhere impressive. Somewhere she could use to elevate her status in her social circles. And my little beach house, now renovated and beautiful, was perfect. She called me crying. Actually crying. Said she was so proud of me for making a smart investment. Said she'd love to help me out by leasing it from me, privately under her name, so I'd have guaranteed income without the hassle of dealing with vacation renters. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor. Like she was the generous mother helping out her struggling divorced daughter. And I believed her. Or maybe I just wanted to believe her. I wanted so desperately to believe that she was finally proud of me. That she finally saw me as capable and successful. That maybe this could be a bridge between us. A business arrangement that would prove I wasn't the financial failure she always implied I was. So I agreed. I let her lease the property under her name. I gave her a sweetheart deal on the rent, barely enough to cover my mortgage, because she was my mother and I thought we were building something together. I thought we were finally on the same team. But then she started lying. To everyone. She told her friends she'd purchased the property herself. Told the neighbors she'd made the down payment with her retirement savings. Posted on social media about her beach house and her investment property and the rewards of financial discipline. She created an entire fictional narrative where she was the successful real estate investor and I was never mentioned. I was erased from the story entirely. Or worse, I was the cautionary tale. The daughter who never recovered from her divorce while she thrived through smart choices. And I knew she was lying. I saw the posts. I heard the conversations. Family members would congratulate her on her beach house purchase, right in front of me, and she'd smile and accept the praise without correction. Without acknowledgement. Without even a glance in my direction. But I never corrected them. I never spoke up. I never said, actually that's my property. I'm the owner. She's just leasing it. Because I genuinely thought, that keeping the peace was more important than claiming credit. That letting her have this win would somehow make her love me more. That silence was the price of family harmony. I was wrong. Silence wasn't keeping the peace. It was enabling her to erase me. To diminish me. To use my success as a prop for her ego while simultaneously treating me like a failure. And after what she did to my children at that pool party, I was done being erased. I opened that folder in my glove compartment and read through the lease agreement. The one she'd signed 3 years ago. The one that clearly stated the property owner, me, retained the right to terminate the lease with 24-hour notice for any reason. It was a protection clause I'd included because I was a responsible property owner. Because I knew that circumstances could change. And circumstances had just changed. Drastically. If you've ever let someone take credit for something you built, just to keep peace, hit like. You deserved appreciation, not erasure. The next morning, I called my realtor. My hands were steady. My voice was calm. I wasn't angry anymore. I was resolved. There's a difference. Anger is hot and reactive and temporary. Resolution is cold and clear and permanent. I need to terminate the lease on the beach house property. Effective immediately. There was a pause. My realtor had handled this property for years. He knew my mother was the tenant. He could hear in my voice that something had shifted. Are you sure? That's going to create some complications for your tenant. I'm sure. The lease agreement allows for 24-hour termination. I'm invoking that clause. Another pause. Longer this time. Okay. I'll draft the notice and send it to the tenant today. She'll need to vacate by tomorrow. Perfect. Thank you. I hung up. And then I sat there in my quiet living room, my modest, paid-for living room in my modest, paid-for house, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness. Not satisfaction. Just peace. The peace that comes from finally standing up for yourself after decades of being walked on. I didn't plan revenge. I want you to understand that. I wasn't scheming or plotting or trying to hurt anyone. I was simply removing myself from a situation that had become toxic. I was exercising my legal right to control my own property. I was establishing a boundary that should have been set years ago. But apparently, boundaries feel like punishment when you've been benefiting from someone's lack of them. 3 hours later, my phone started blowing up. The family group chat, the one that had been silent during my humiliation at the pool party, suddenly erupted with activity. First, my mother, "Why is my lease canceled?" Then my realtor's professional response, sent to the group because my mother had CC'd everyone. "Ma'am, as stated in your lease agreement, the property owner has decided not to renew. Please vacate the premises by tomorrow at 5 p.m. All security deposits will be returned pending final inspection." Then my mother again. "Who is the owner? I demand to speak to them." And my realtor, bless him. "The property owner prefers not to engage directly. All communication should go through this office. Please contact me if you need assistance with moving arrangements." And then silence. The kind of silence that speaks volumes. The kind of silence where you can feel everyone in the group chat frantically scrolling back through years of conversations, through social media posts, through family gatherings, trying to piece together the truth they'd all somehow missed. My mother had told everyone she owned that property. For 3 years, she'd accepted congratulations and admiration and status based on a lie. And now, with one professional email from a realtor, that entire facade had cracked wide open. My phone started buzzing with private messages. My siblings, my cousins, even some of my mother's friends who had my number. All variations of the same shocked question. "Wait, you own the beach house? Since when? Why didn't you ever say anything?" I didn't respond to any of them. Not yet. I was too busy watching the family group chat implode in real time. Watching my mother spiral from indignant demands to desperate confusion to something that looked almost like panic. Because she'd just realized something. The same thing everyone else was realizing. Every post she'd made about her beach house? Every party she'd hosted? Every time she'd used that property to elevate her status? It was all built on property I owned. Property I had graciously let her use. Property I had stayed silent about while she claimed credit. And now everyone knew. Not because I'd exposed her. Not because I'd made some grand announcement or dramatic reveal. But because consequences have a way of exposing truth all on their own. If consequences make people angry, it's because they were counting on you never fighting back. Like this if you've ever shocked someone with your silence. She showed up at my house the next afternoon. I was expecting it. I'd actually been surprised it took her that long. I heard her car door slam. That aggressive, violent slam that announces rage before a word is spoken. Then her fist pounding on my front door. Not knocking. Pounding. I took a breath. Steadied myself. And opened the door. She looked like a woman unraveling. Her hair was disheveled. Her makeup was smudged. Her clothes, always so carefully curated, were wrinkled and mismatched. This was my mother without her armor of perfection. This was what existed beneath the facade. "Do you want to ruin my life?" She didn't even wait for a greeting. Just launched directly into attack mode, her voice shrill and desperate. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Everyone knows now. Everyone." I stood in my doorway calm. So calm it seemed to infuriate her more. "Everyone knows what, exactly?" That the house, that I don't." She couldn't even finish the sentence. Couldn't say out loud what everyone had discovered. That she'd been lying. That she'd stolen credit. That her carefully constructed image was built on someone else's foundation. "Everyone knows that you've been leasing my property," I said, my voice even and quiet. That's not a secret. That's just a fact. You humiliated me. And that's when something inside me snapped. Not into rage. Into cold, absolute clarity. I humiliated you? My voice was still quiet, but it carried a weight that made her step back. I humiliated you? She opened her mouth to respond, but I wasn't done. You screamed at my children in front of 50 guests. You called me a divorced failure in front of my kids. You kicked them out of a pool party because their existence embarrassed you. You have spent years treating me like a shameful secret while taking credit for my accomplishments. And you think I'm the one who humiliated you. That's different. It's not different. My voice rose slightly, breaking through that careful calm. You humiliated my children. Your grandchildren. You looked them in the eyes and told them they weren't good enough to swim in your pool. Except it wasn't your pool, was it? It was my house. My property. My investment that you've been using to impress your friends for 3 years while telling everyone I'm a failure. She was crying now. Not the manipulative tears she usually deployed to regain control. Real tears. Tears of someone whose entire world was crashing down around them. You're ruining everything. My friends, my reputation, Your reputation was built on lies. I pulled out the folder I'd been carrying. The lease agreement. The original property documents. All with my name clearly visible. This is the lease you signed 3 years ago. You knew exactly who owned that property. You knew, and you lied about it anyway. She stared at the papers like they were a murder weapon. Because in a way, they were the murder of her false narrative. I didn't take anything from you. I continued, my voice returning to that terrible calm. You were borrowing what was never yours. And honestly, I would have let you keep borrowing it. I would have stayed silent forever about who really owned it. I would have let you have that status and that credit because I loved you. Because you're my mother. Because I kept hoping that maybe if I gave you enough, sacrificed enough, stayed quiet enough, you might finally love me back. I do love. You don't. And saying it out loud felt like lancing a wound that had been infected for decades. You love what I can do for you. You love what you can take from me. But you don't love me. And you proved that when you humiliated my children. They're fine. Kids are resilient. They cried for 2 hours asking why their grandmother hates them. My voice broke on that last word. They're not fine. And they will remember this. They will remember the day their grandmother chose her ego over their hearts. Just like I remember all the times you chose your reputation over me. She was openly sobbing now, but I felt nothing. No satisfaction. No sympathy. Just emptiness. The emptiness of finally letting go of hope you didn't realize you were still carrying. You didn't just ruin your own life, I said quietly. You ruined any chance of having a relationship with your grandchildren. Not because I'm keeping them from you, but because they'll never trust you again. Because children remember when adults fail them. And you failed them in the most public, most brutal way possible. So what now? She asked, her voice small and bitter. You're just going to punish me forever? I'm not punishing you. I'm protecting my children. There's a difference. I held up the lease agreement. This isn't revenge. This is me establishing a boundary I should have set years ago. I'm not your emotional punching bag anymore. I'm not your credit-stealing opportunity. I'm not your shameful secret. I'm just done. You can't just erase me from your life. Watch me. And I closed the door. Not a slam. Just a quiet, final click. The sound of a chapter ending. Through the door I heard her cry. Heard her say my name. Heard her car eventually start and drive away. And I felt nothing. No guilt. No regret. No second-guessing. Just peace. If you believe boundaries are not disrespect, like this, you should never apologize for protecting your children. It's been 6 months since that day. 6 months since I terminated the lease. 6 months since I closed the door on a relationship that had been poisoning me for 30 years. Here's what happened next. I relisted the beach house property for rent. But this time, I didn't lease it to someone who wanted to use it for status. I found a young family, a single mom with 2 kids who had just survived their own difficult divorce. She couldn't afford much, but she needed a fresh start. A place where her children could heal and play and feel safe. I gave her a below-market rate and a flexible lease. Because that property wasn't built to impress anyone. It was built to provide security. And now it's providing security for someone who actually deserves it. My mother? She's been conspicuously absent from social media. No more sunset photos. No more champagne brunch posts. No more carefully curated images of success. The few times she does post, it's generic inspirational quotes that feel hollow and desperate. Her comments section has gotten quieter. People are polite, but the admiration is gone. Because everyone knows now. Everyone understands that the life she was selling was never real. The family dynamics have shifted in interesting ways. Some of my siblings reached out to apologize for staying silent at the pool party. For watching my children be humiliated and doing nothing. Their apologies felt genuine, but also insufficient. Because silence in the face of cruelty is its own form of cruelty. I've accepted their apologies, but our relationships are different now. There's a distance that can't quite be bridged. A trust that can't quite be restored. Some cousins have completely cut contact with my mother. Apparently, I wasn't the only family member she'd been weaponizing for social status. My story gave others permission to speak their own truths. To set their own boundaries. To stop pretending that blood relation excuses toxic behavior. And my children, they're healing. Slowly. They don't ask about their grandmother anymore. At first they did. Why don't we see Grandma? Is Grandma still mad at us? Did we do something wrong? And every time, I had to explain in age-appropriate ways that Grandma's behavior was about Grandma's problems, not about them. That they are worthy and loved and enough, exactly as they are. We started going to family therapy. Just the three of us. Working through the trauma of that public humiliation. Working through the confusion of losing a relationship they thought was secure. Working through the complicated reality that sometimes people who are supposed to love you unconditionally don't actually know how to love at all. And we started new traditions. Pool days at the public pool, where my kids can splash and play without fear of judgment. Beach trips where we build sandcastles and collect shells and laugh without walking on eggshells. Holidays with chosen family. Friends who show up with genuine love instead of conditional approval. My daughter said something last week that broke my heart and healed it at the same time. We were at the pool, and she was teaching her little brother to swim. And she said, "Mom, this is way better than Grandma's party. Because nobody here is mean." Such a simple observation. Such a profound truth. Nobody here is mean. That's the bar. That's the baseline requirement for being in our lives now. Don't be mean. Don't humiliate. Don't weaponize love. Don't use children as props for your ego. It's not a high bar, but apparently it was too high for my mother to clear. I don't hate her. I want to be clear about that. I don't spend my days plotting revenge, or celebrating her struggles, or wishing harm on her. I just don't think about her much anymore. She's become irrelevant to my life in the same way a toxic job you quit becomes irrelevant. You don't hate your old boss. You just stop letting them occupy space in your head. Sometimes I wonder if she's learned anything. If she's reflected on her behavior and recognized the destruction she caused. If she misses her grandchildren and regrets the choices that cost her their trust. But honestly, it doesn't matter. Her growth or lack thereof is no longer my responsibility. I'm not her therapist. I'm not her teacher. I'm not her emotional support system. I'm just the daughter she lost when she chose her ego over her.